A company either has talent or it has money, right, to grow. Most of these companies, and we didn't start with money, right? We had talent, right? But when you said, like, when you get the tech and the talent together, then money comes.
Welcome to Survey Booker Sessions. Tune in to hear from people working in a range of industries and roles to provide you ideas that you can take away and use in your own business. I'm your host, Matt Nally, the founder and director of Survey Booker, which is the leading CRM and survey management system for surveyors. So on today's episode, we've got Rune, who's the co-founder and CEO of Fantastic Services. So thanks for coming on today.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
I think you've got a very interesting story. I've obviously read a lot about how you started and so on. But Fantastic Services, am I right? You started back in 2009. You were looking to get a carpet cleaned and sort of having issues with that process.
Yeah, I mean, in 2009, I remember it. It feels like so many years ago now, but I remember that back then I was looking at the websites. I was like typed in carpet cleaners London or something else on Google, and I got all these websites, and I called some of them, and it was like, and they didn't pick up. Nobody answered. Nobody could really tell me what the price was for a carpet cleaning. I was like, this just got to change. At that stage, I was in the travel industry and had built one of the first things where it connected flights with hotels to create a dynamic package. And I was like, this can't be possible to solve. Sort of like to say, is there a carpet cleaner available, and what does it cost? So that was kind of like the remit. And then that's when I met Anton, who were big in the corporate world of this. And then we said, like, this is instantly switch on, and let's build the first engine that can take a card and actually make the booking. And that's what we built. That grew from domestic cleaning to carpet cleaning. Then we had end of tenancy cleaning. End of tenancy cleaning got cancelled quite often because the moving guys hadn't turned up. So one of our customers called, "Can you not get me a removals car?" And we said yes. And then we started a removals company inside it. And that's really been the journey. We do 55 plus services now, everything from pest control to handyman to plumbers to electricians to furniture assembly to gardening to mowing your lawn, from landscaping and everything else. So we do that. We do EPC checks for landlords. We do Airbnb cleaning. So we really just expanded and expanded every year.
One of the bits I was fascinated with was the growth into, I think I read it was about 70 different services now. And what was the driver for that in terms of how do you expand but keep a consistent message? I know the services, I suppose, are interrelated in terms of the real property services, but is there a challenge there to keeping a marketing message straightforward as you change the different services?
Very much. I mean, the company was known as Fantastic Cleaners. It's still very well known as Fantastic Cleaners because that was the biggest domestic cleaning company there was. So expanding into the other services meant we adapted the name Fantastic Services and became Fantastic Services. So that was a longer journey for the customers to understand the other services provided. And that was a longer journey than we had expected because we were so used to, oh, well, we're Fantastic Cleaners, but it kind of says what it is on the tin. I think there's a competitor of ours who is called something with plumbers, and now trying to do the same with the plumbers and handymen and this stuff here. And it's still, whether they're as successful as we were in adopting that, we'll see over time into the multi-service industry. But that was 5 years ago, and I'd say now, the split is even between cleaning and all the other services. And that means that we are getting customers in who's like, okay, well, oh, so they also do cleaning, right? They've used us for removals, and they say, oh, they also do cleaning. They also do oven cleaning. They also do carpet cleaning. They also do the other service. So it depends on the entry on where the client comes in and what kind of service they book first. And then I think the technology, but also our very, very, very skilled sales team, along with our what we call the concierge inside, is the people who are talking and making sure that the service happens in the right way. Really helps with that. Of course, when we went into plumbing and so forth, we wanted to do it completely properly and everything else. So that meant having skilled and trained professionals on that level and so forth. And that's a different industry from where we are when we now do boiler installation and so forth. So that's a different industry from, let's say, I wouldn't say less skilled, but just a different aspect of of supply in a cleaner who goes out and cleans regularly. So it's a different education. So every single service has their own amazingness and their own difficulties and own challenges. And I think that we split it up very much so that they're centrally managed in that way, and not centrally managed as in because that service does so, so should that service. That's each service for itself, to speak.
Yeah. Well, one of the talking about how you grew in terms of the services. One of the aspects I was interested in was the fact that you use the franchise model. Is there a challenge in terms of that versus employing people? Was there a reason you went down that route instead of the direct employment?
Well, direct employment has its benefits. It also has its disadvantages. Is one is the supply side of things. What we kind of learned over time, we got many years experience in this, is that the ownership and the understanding of the client and delivering a better service, and that's where franchising allows that, because you don't get repeat customers unless you do a good service. So rather than, I always think of it a little bit like eBay and Amazon, right? We know eBay, anybody sells anything there. On Amazon, it's a very vetted process. It's a very controlled process of what goes in there. It's based on reviews, but it's also based on, are they supplying on time? Are they doing their work on time? And one of the things, we didn't lower our ambition. We called ourselves Fantastic Services, which we wanted to be the best. We didn't call perfect, but we wanted to be the best, and that's how we kept the customers and were able to get to that level. The franchising model allowed us to get the uh, professionals who are doing the job take more ownership of what quality they're delivering.
I was interested. I thought that might be the case in terms of they have more motivation potentially in terms of they're directly responsible for how they're performing. Is there a challenge from a perspective of consistency of service, or does that come through what you're mentioning earlier about sort of the tech side, the I suppose training and all that kind of stuff?
Well, that's what training comes in for. It's also the way of monitoring it, and the tech allows us to monitor it. And it allows us to see where is the lacks, where are the pitfalls, what service is not up to the level of what we call fantastic. So it allows us to do that more, and it's not just, our systems kind of started as the booking as the primary thing, then it went into performance management, then it went into payment management, then it went to field management and optimization of schedule as well. So making sure that we drive, I think we're down 18% of miles driven because of the way that we can maneuver certain jobs around and so forth. So that means saving CO2 and a ton of other things that we get benefit from it, by scale as well. So to answer, yeah, so to answer your question about the consistency of service, I think one is understanding that each service is different. The other one was setting specific benchmark for it, and then making sure that you monitor it, and not just monitor, practically train and said like, okay, well, the repeat customers or the quality feedback is not enough. There's more customer service on this service than the other service, um, and then comparing that for what it should benchmark on that service, because not all services are equal.
As a point, then, so how do you monitor and measure the different providers, and what for you is a flag that you can help them improve? And
Well, as I wrote in my book, Fantastic Business, it's about measure what matters, right? And one of the things that I highlight in the book is the first job delay. If you're late for the first job, you really don't have an excuse for being late for the first job, but you're going to be delayed for the third and the fourth job as well because you're late for the first job. So instead of saying, "Oh well, you got 80% delay," which will happen over the day, certain jobs take longer because you want to complete it. So instead of looking at what actual thing matters on delay, and then the first job delay was more important than the second and the third, because you were more likely to get the second and the third if the first job was delayed. So those kind of things. So it monitors, when are they arriving? Are they arriving, on time for the customer, in what time zone they're expected? I mean, this is also another promise that we realize is hard to keep, because most things you book and it's like, we'll either come Tuesday or Thursday. When? Either Tuesday or Thursday. Like, what do you mean by Tuesday or Thursday? Yeah, maybe we'll come, and then they call Friday and say, "Oh, sorry, we didn't turn up." Right. So we always said like, okay, well, the idea is to get as close to a time limit as possible. So that was one of the things we measure. Then we measure feedback rate, the NPS score of Net Promoter Score. Will they tell their friends that we've done a good service? And there's a number of other factors inside the service of saying, like, what is the repeat purchase on this one and this one, and based on that. So we have an enormous amount of data that allows us to do this.
And so those with those repeat sort of customers, do you push your services to them after they've had their first experience, or do they tend to sort of have such a good experience that they're then interested in what
It's
else you might
both.
do? Both, yeah,
It's both ways. I mean, like I always said, like, I can't make you buy a pest control if you don't have any pests, right? And I can't make you move your house if you don't need to move, right? So it depends on which service is needed at what stage, right? So there's a life cycle of services of, well, first you need this, then you need this, then you need this, then you need this. Then we know the likelihood of you needing a carpet clean after that time. We know the likelihood of you needing a gardening again, right? So because I can't sell you gardening if you don't have a garden. I can't tell you pool cleaning if you don't have a pool. So it is about what are your needs, and then it is about the awareness of it.
definitely. I think one of the things that interested me as well around that growth aspect was I think I read in sort of first year turnover was like 800,000 or something like that, and so it was quite a quick growth trajectory. What what was the key to doing that when I imagine you'd have very small budgets to begin with on that? And I think you mentioned frugality was key to that side of things, but yeah, how do you go with a small budget to such a quick growth?
I mean, it was down to, the whole every business in this stuff is supply and demand, right? Do you have the people to do the job, and do you have the people who want to have the job done, right? That's supply and demand. That's the business. Um, and that's where the little bit of unfair advantage is that, I had to 10 to 15 years experience in marketing of consumer products beforehand. So, we got inundated with demand. It was actually supply that was harder in the beginning. And it varies based on times with Brexit. It varies based on, what's going on in the market, job market, in demand. The business will always be supply and demand. So that's the side of things. The secret sauce was very simple: is that we knew what we had to do on advertising and marketing, and that's what we also in our franchises, that we are providing that as a service. It is what we know how to do, and we know how to do that at a very high level. I worked in some big corporates beforehand. I had £1 million weekly budgets. I had enormous amounts of this, and one thing was that they were overspending. Most of these things. I mean, I've worked for advertising on the side of the agency side of things. I've worked on the side of the client and so forth. When you marry those two things, you get frugality, right? So it's like it's one thing is you outsource your advertising to a company. The other thing is that you learn and you know how to do it, and you do it for the company. There's different things in charging 10% fee on your advertising budget and then saying I need to make 10% profit on your advertising budget. Right? That's two different things. Um, so that helps a lot, and that's why we could continue with that growth.
But what was it about the I suppose the messages that you were putting out? Was it the way you were doing it, or was it the type of message? Because in terms of other suppliers that were in the industry.
No, I don't think that was the case in the beginning. It was we had more jobs than everybody else had, and said, like, we have the jobs. You can get 4 jobs a day, 5 jobs a day, and they're high paying jobs, versus you can go out and scrape together 2 or 3 jobs maybe Tuesday, then you're going to get some maybe 3 Thursday. You can go in that way. It became more regular for them. So I think that was the very simple thing. It also, there's something inside Fantastic which is called the 360. It's like we look at the founders and the company, the staff. We look at the franchisees, our pros, and our partners in that way, and then we look at the customers, and then we look at the planet, right? So it's about how do we do that, and I think that alone attracted a lot of people. We haven't always got it right, and it's always a work in progress, but it is kind of what makes us slightly different from, you're just buying a lead, and you're paying 30. You have no idea whether it's a real lead or not a real lead. So that makes a difference. So and when there are things, you can actually talk to us. We're approachable. I think that makes a big difference because when you're out there doing the jobs, it can be alone. It can be quite lonely, and it's like you're doing 20 jobs, 30 jobs a week, and you're like, oh, what am I growing? Am I learning? Am I doing well? Am I doing this stuff here? And there's a team behind you that's helping you with that growth, and also saying what's the next level? Like, how do you get to save up enough money to buy two more vans and start hiring people yourself? That kind of career glass post, because before that there wasn't. You were just always going to be alone. So I think that was what attracted them. I don't think it was a specific message. It was more who we are that made that happen.
And yeah, I think it's an interesting one from a surveyor perspective, because it's the same challenge. You're out doing a lot of jobs, but then you're alone when you're doing them most of the time. You're not often back in an office or have a team to call up, particularly for sole traders. So I can see the appeal there, definitely. Um, in terms of the marketing to consumer, how did you get those jobs in so that their diaries were full? So in terms of the message that you were putting out to consumers to use fantastic services or fantastic cleaning over, um, anyone else that they might call up.
Well, I mean, I think one thing was that we had availability. I mean, like the secret sauce in consumer is, number one is answer the calls or take the booking, give them a good price. Number two is turn up. Number three is do a good job. Right, then there's a couple of other things, but that's pretty much it. So you could, everybody can say they're the best. Everybody can say they've got the best things. I mean, you can look at our reviews, you can look at our ratings and so forth, and it shows we are the best. It's like we're always above four in that. So it's it's about that trust. You know, and that's where it comes from. I mean, specific messaging. I mean, I've looked at ads for 10 or almost 20 years now in that industry, and I was like, everybody can write anything on it. It is about the fundamentals. Is turning up. Answer the calls, give them an accurate price that works, and turn up on the time that they agreed, and then do a good job. That's it. It seems more it seems more advanced than others. But it's like if you're a sole trader, you've got your little telephone with you, and you can't do the mobile phone while you're in the car. You can't go in on an app and buy a leads while you're in the car and so forth, and all that stuff is taken care of you in the back end. So those kind of things. I think there's a lot of perspective of always gets back to that. But at the end of the day, it's a mix of the back office and the help you have. So messaging wise, I mean, it's what it is. It's like I also don't want to give all the secret sauce away from it, but people can look at our website. But it isn't that magic word that does it. I mean, fantastic is a good name, you know, and it's what we are. Yeah.
I think it was an interesting or great choice of name in terms of it's a reminder every day of the values you're working towards. So you can't drop the ball because you've got that focus there. It's in front of the customer the whole time, not hidden away on how you speak somewhere.
Well, it also put a unrelenting pressure on us at times. It's like we're not the cheapest, but we're also not the highest end of pricing, right? But I think it's very easy to run a team of five that does an incredible job, like at the level of where everything is this stuff here. It's like I wonder how those businesses run on it. So you have to find a good place where it is just above good enough. And I think that's what, and people will put very high standards to us and say like the demand is quite high, and oh, you're calling yourself that. I said, yeah, we do, because when I look at the industry standards, right, and when we started in the industry, like what we looked at was like a complaint rate on a normal service on other companies, and we bought a couple of companies as well. It was about 12%, and it was like, that's insane. It was like 12%. And then after 2 3 years, we got it down to four. Then we got it down to three. And when you think about the amount of job, I mean, I still get annoyed, that there's even one job that goes wrong, right? But there's people. A car breaks down, something else happens. There's people. One was sick, then they replaced it with someone from the team who didn't know. You know, but when you look at the overall stuff, it's just like 100% isn't possible, but near 100% is incredible, and that's what fantastic is.
I'm guessing what the difference between 12 and 4% was, just going back to the basics you mentioned a minute ago, in terms of turning up on time, doing a good job.
Measuring, and then having good incentives to go above that, right? So like understanding, because if you do 40 jobs, right, and the feedback comes, 2 or 3 weeks later and saying, oh, you're not good enough and this stuff here, it's like, I don't know which of the 40 jobs I didn't do well, right? So the closer you can get to getting the feedback on the actual job, on the actual performance and thing, and most importantly, understanding what went wrong. I mean, there's some customers who will never be happy. Actually, let's just put it that way. They'll never be happy, even if we were free and we spent the 12 hours extra on the job, they're not going to be happy. It's like, it's sorry, but your carpet is not fixable, or it is what it is. It's like, you have three more rooms than you said you had on the removals. So yes, the price is going to go up. It's going to be a few more. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's never, there's unrelenting standards. But the measuring, and the closer you can get to the feedback, the more accurate the training becomes. It's not blanket training; it's individual. Yeah.
The measuring of that and in terms of the customer and net promoter scores and stuff like that, is that all bit part of what you developed in terms of your tech? Because one of the things you mentioned is like tech with a heart. I think I read somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, is that where that all gets fed in from?
Yes, that gets fed in there, and it gets measured and monitored, and then it gets fed back immediately. And this also, we launch tips, and customers can provide tips. And at the end of the day, it's like, if you come back with £100 more a month, or £200 more a month in tips, then you're doing good, right? What became a problem with it, right? And I'll tell you what was, like, once we measured everything, is like, there's a very big company, and actually it's one of my own old bosses who's the CEO of the company, very big company in the UK, who's in a lot of trouble because they manage walking monitors and all this other stuff. I think it's very important with tech is that it's not just the stick, right? And I think that, and we got that wrong for a couple of years. So it became more and more like, oh yeah, you need to train that, you need to train that, and you need to train that, and then we found more things that, oh yeah, that improves the service. I think it's very important to understand both of the side of things. That tech is what it is, and it can be used that way. So I think that was one of the keys to success here.
Where's tech important to implement, and where
Well,
should it not?
the number one thing, me and my CTO, we have a lot of discussion because we also provide the software, and it's not fantastic anymore. It's a completely separate company now. We also provide the software to other companies, and the CTO and CEO of that company is like always saying, like, well, if people think that they have to automate 100% of something in order to benefit from it, and it's like, oh, but there's one thing we can't automate, so that means we can only do 90% or 80%. And then they don't automate the rest, and that's, I think, is the big mistake. It's like, if you can automate 80% of it, do it. If you can automate 30% of it, do it. That's what I think is important, and I think that's a big lesson for companies, to say, like, you need to get on the take wagon, because it's there, right? And even if you can't optimize 100% or automate 100%, then the 30-40% allows you to slowly chip away at the rest. But a lot of them are going, oh well, we can't do that. That will always be someone entering. Okay, but that's part of the business, right? And accept that, and then go with, well, I can optimize 80%. I can get 60% of the bookings in online, but I can't get 100%. Okay, well, you know what? Take the 60%, or take the 30%, or 10%, if that's the case. Take it. And that's I think is the lesson for all service companies out there, is to not aim for, oh, I can't solve it all with it, then I won't do it. And I said, no, start. You know, it's a bit like, who wouldn't use the internet, right?
Yeah, yeah, or
Mm.
emails or anything like that. It's an interesting discussion I have sometimes because it's almost the opposite. Not where it's I can't automate all of it, so I won't try. But almost I don't want to automate any of it because that takes away a personal service. And I say it's the opposite in terms of the more you can automate, the more free time you get to then be
Yeah,
able to speak to customers and stuff. But
that's a big discussion, right? Because it's like, we can't do 100% of it online. Okay, there are people who would like to have the call. We in Fantastic, I think, and that's one of the reasons we are there. We have both, right? And there are people who never want to talk to a person; they just want to see what time is available and what the cost, and click the button, right? So I think that it's a very strong mistake to say, oh well, it does this stuff here. We measure it as like, and the work that they're doing now with their new online booking system, which is incredible. It's based on how the flight industry works. In some cases, it can increase the service versus a person.
Yes.
It can increase the upsell, it can increase the reliability, it can increase a lot of things. And I think that it's not one or the other. It's what's the best of each.
Yeah, and how can they complement each other rather
Yeah,
than it's a battle between the two?
it's not one or the other. It's how can they work together on this stuff here. The personal service, you can add that, and you can add that later. It really depends. As I said, the service comes down to the customers. I know customers who'd never want to talk to anyone. It's like like getting a phone or doing something else. Like they're texting, on WhatsApp. What is it? 11 billion messages a day, right? On WhatsApp, right? There's the 20 billion text messages sent and this stuff here a day. It's like it really is. There is a percentage of people who just don't want to grab the phone, and then there's a percentage who do, and who really wants that. So I said, like, you're doing the customers who want to not grab the phone and who just wants to book. You're doing them a disservice, and you're actually not offering them a customer service by not having it.
Yeah, that's a very powerful point.
I mean, like if I go on and I remember my journey back then, it's like I called 10 of them. Only three of them picked up, right? Out of those three that I got through, only two of them actually turned up, and then that was there to do a quote. How can you run a business like that? That was my view.
No.
How can you run a business like that? It's like, that's like, sorry, I mean, 10 calls, three of them went through. So, like, okay, none of them I could check the prices, none of them I could do this stuff here, and it's like everything else in the world but services. I can go in and see how much does it cost to book a hotel and a flight to Paris, and what does the theater cost there, and I can actually see, oh, does it have tickets for that opera, or is the museum open, and what does it cost, right? But I can't see what a carpet cleaning of a two-bedroom flat is going to cost me. I just couldn't understand that. I come from the online industry since 1999, right? So I couldn't understand that, and it just frustrated me. None of them could say it, so they had to turn up, and then they were, I had to take 2 days off to get a quote for a carpet clean. I was like, this doesn't work. It's like, and then that was not to do the carpet clean; it was to do the quotation for it.
Yeah, so you still get time off for the actual
Yeah, so
the
then the
actual job.
second guy comes out, does the wood job for a day, but he didn't turn up on the day, and he came the day after. Like, I don't have time for this, right? So I don't know. To me, it was just a no-brainer.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely is the way from the story you had, and I think there's quite a lot of businesses that don't necessarily value the value of their leads. We did a study a couple of years ago, just as the pandemic had hit, but surveyors were able to go back out again. And I think we emailed about 130 odd companies, and the majority did send an initial response back, but then no one ever followed up with that again. It was just left and ignored, and so part of the process we have is trying to sort of then nurture those leads as well. But I was always amazed by the fact that there's no value placed on that lead. We'll make one contact, we've sort of ticked a box, I suppose, and then it gets left. And again, that's also bad customer service. Just sort of leaving it there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like, even the unanswered calls of those 10 ones, 10 of them, it's like, to me, that was a competitive advantage.
Definitely. How as you've grown, obviously you've taken on lots of staff, and you've gone into other countries as well and different services. How do you balance your time in terms of how you split your time working in the business, working on the business, and taking time out to sort of work on strategy? And is that quite a hard balance to get?
That's a hard balance to get. And like, even after 14 years, it's like sometimes I think I got it right, then COVID happens, right? And you suddenly have to rethink the whole book. It's like a half of our services couldn't be supplied, right? And one service is going to go up and this stuff here, and one service isn't going to go up, and balancing that. It's we've got very good managers in the company. We got some incredible help, and we got some incredible people. I think without that, there would be no company in that aspect of it. It doesn't matter how much good strategies you have, and so forth. It is an operations company.
Yeah, and getting the right team in for the right roles, and
So,
empowering people to.
and then, I mean, it's like there's so much strategy to be done, and there's more strategy to be done, and there's a lot more to achieve. It's mixing that operations versus the strategy, and then you've got two partners instead of one, which helps. So it's not just me. There's different people thinking about strategy, about different things in the strategy, which allows you to do it. I mean, you got to look at each department on what should be the strategy for them, and then finding that out, and then what's the overall strategy for the company. So there's a number of things to go through, and we'll see. It's going to be an interesting journey again. We had to rethink everything in COVID, right? It was a big shift. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, consumer interactions changed, and yeah, how people worked changed a lot. But I suppose one of the other bits I was wanted to discuss was how do you keep your passion for what you do over sort of 13 plus years? Because it's do you ever find there's sort of times you need to take time out just to sort of step back again, or have you always been quite consistent?
I think it's important to step out. I think it's very important to maintain that, but also, we've had our times when it wasn't that much, and it's like, oh, we're just going through the grind again. Then we shifted the company, and one of the things that we've been very passionate about that's really led us into the next phase, was about the planet. What can we do to our services to make them more sustainable? What can we do to, like blankets and removals rather than plastic and so forth? And what are we doing on chemicals? What are we doing on this stuff, on XYZ? How do we reduce the number of miles driven? How do you get more electrical cars so that we can do the things? I think that's been a huge driver in getting back into it. It's like we're actually at a size where it matters what we do. What we change matters, and it makes an impact, and that gives you back.
Yeah, yeah. And is that it's a big sort of focus at the moment in terms of your sense of strategy as well, or is it just because as a company value? So I think that some people get quite cynical about it, don't they?
No, it's in everything. It's in everything that we do. I mean, like, how do we get and make sure we can supply? Now we're solar with the main office and so forth. So it's a big part of it. That's the game we're playing. It's we got to that level where we can afford ourselves that luxury, of looking at. So it's not just a. I mean, and the reason why I don't push it as a marketing thing is, like, I just want to work. I really got tired of companies just really pushing it as marketing, and it's, oh, we're doing this. It's like I said, it doesn't really matter. We're fantastic services. We'll do what needs to be done. We'll make it opt out instead of opt in. It's like, do you want eco products? No, it's opt out. If you really don't want, you have to opt out of these things, and those kind of things. And we just, instead of going at it and beating a louder drum, we just said, like, what can we do, each one of us, and what can we do in the office, and what can we do for ourselves, and that's what we've gone deeper and deeper into.
I think that's what actually you had an interesting marketing campaign. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was in one of the London councils where you effectively clean the streets in order to do your marketing. That was a genius idea, I thought.
Yeah, we've done pubs, we've done schools. I mean, we did a lot of cleaning up in schools. Like, one of the things, many years ago, I read the book. I think it's either it's Great by Choice, or uh, I think it's Great by Choice. It's one of Jim Collins' book, and he writes about the mayor in New York who has this broken window concept, right? And Giuliano, back in those days, he said, like, if there's a broken window, then graffiti comes. If graffiti comes and the window remains broken, what happens is that means that somebody's not looking after that area. That means that maybe some crimes, they'll start dealing drugs there. Maybe something else happens, and that's when it escalates onto gun violence, which is in the U.S. So he had this idea of taking trains off the track within 1 hour of them being graffitied, and that stopped the graffiti, right? Because it's like that means, shit, somebody's watching.
Yes. Yeah.
And when we had capacity, we said the same with certain garden places in London. We've done quite a number of schools and quite a number of areas around schools where people were fly tipping, right? Which is one of the worst things there is, right? But when they start doing that, if people see there's three bags lying there, and suddenly it's five, and suddenly it's 10, then suddenly it becomes a rubbish tip, right? And the plants die and everything else die. And then when that happens, it's like nobody's looking after it. Graffiti comes in. It's like the broken window. So we had the same. It's like when people come to us and say, like, can you do this for our school, or can you do this? And it's mainly for schools. We'll do it. is restore their gardens or help a kitchen garden and so forth. And it's part of that concept of the broken window, so it's part of our philosophy of what we're doing, and we do it in the same in with regards to repairing things, whether it's repairing in the office. And one of the things we got to was that because we had a lot of Eastern European handymen, um, and one thing that is like from our perspective in the West, we're always looking at like, oh, how do I do so and so forth, and it's just a replace culture, right? So the amount of repairs we can do is so incredible. I mean, the things that can be repaired, like what we're doing on doors, rather than just replacing a door because there's a scratch in it and so forth, and that is incredible. Like we have this service, hard surface repairs, and that's incredible. And that is part of the longer term vision, is like repair, don't replace. And it's the same. It's this thing about you can repair a lot more than you think you can. And we're not used to that, but that's a whole culture shift, and that's going to come more and more. So that's another thing we're looking. Yeah,
It's interesting. I think there's a lot of things going full circle because obviously years ago you would only ever dream of repairing rather than throwing away and replacing, and then we had this transition, didn't we? To the washing machine's broken, throw it out, buy a new one. But I think
yeah,
there's a lot of things that are becoming more cyclical like that, and there are challenges I think as a consumer sometimes not knowing how to get into the back of something. But I suppose it's partly as well as a consumer moving away from that laziness. It's easy just to not think about it because it's cheaper just to go and buy something else. But it's interesting you're looking down that route as well.
yeah. Well, we've always been looking down that route. I think it's human nature is to solve this this way. I mean, and I think that we've got so complacent as people in that way, and I think there's so much more to be done. So the repairing stuff and also the recycling and so forth, and what we do with waste. Like one of our big aims is to get more into the waste of the recycling of this in our waste removals, and say like, well, if we can sort out more of this stuff here, then we can sort out more, and we can sort it better than others. There's a lot of technology in that business as well, so we're looking into that. We're looking into so many areas of where we can make a difference.
I liked your point as well about the you let one thing slip, like the broken window, and then other things build up. Because I think that's really relevant for absolutely any area of life. So within a business, if you're not watching the customer score, for example, and understanding what they're getting out of it, the standards start to slip on other things in the business, and it's very hard to then retrain a team to come out of a mentality that they've got into. So you have to be watching all of those different touch points and making sure you're providing the best service at every point and not just letting it slip a little bit each day. Because very quickly things drop.
That, that's why I said to culture eats marketing for breakfast. You said about, oh, what was the message you sent to the customers? It's like, I didn't really have to send that many messages. We had to do the job. That was one of the things, because you asked about that, and I was like, okay, well, I didn't think about it that way, because it's like, well, doing the job eats the marketing for breakfast.
Yeah, and that becomes your marketing, I suppose, because everyone's raving about it. And
I
yeah,
mean, at the moment, we still have a lot of cancellations. I mean, like COVID was a big one, and especially coming out of COVID, both customers were sick and pros were sick, and we took a very hard approach in saying, like, if there's any doubt, don't turn up. You know, um, Cancellations and so forth still counts for quite a large part. And then we're working around finding a better way of work-life balance also for our pros now. Uh, so we're working around that in order to make sure that the availability becomes more fluid. And that was more by, okay, well, you've got X amount of days more to do your things than before, and then we added some more travel time and a couple of other things to make sure that that worked, and that really increased it. It is, and it'll continue to change the behavior of people. And that's going to be, this is not a software business in that way, right? It is people doing the job, and that's what I think our launch of tips will help with that as well, and has started, people are starting to tip, and I was like, okay, this is finally, because I always said, came back to this stuff, is like, unfortunately, you know while we are 3% of complaints, unfortunately, those three complaints fills 90% of our, what we get told. that's what I said. Like the negativity on that. It's like, sorry, we do 97% jobs correct, and we don't get, maybe they're not perfect, right? But we get 97% of our jobs right on the day. But the 3% we hear about, it's like, okay, yeah, yeah. So, and then that's where all the focus goes. And it's like, well, you forget sometimes to look at, well, we got the 93% or 97%. It's like, well, continue looking after those.
Did you say you've implemented a tips aspect for that, so you can get the sort of the very positive feedback the other way?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome, awesome. I suppose just to finish off, what would be your top tips for success in a business generally?
Well, I think getting the right tech, but as I said, culture eats any other thing for breakfast. So the right tech, the right team, is the two key corner to success. Then the message, you can do what everybody else does. It doesn't have to be over the top, but those two things aligns. When those two things aligns, that's when you have success. I mean, a company either has talent or it has money, right, to grow. Um, Most of these companies, and we didn't start with money, right? We had talent, right? But when you said, like, when you get the tech and the talent together, then money comes. You know, that's how it works.
Yeah, yeah. No, really, really fascinating today, and yeah, thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts, and
Thank you.
really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah, look forward to hearing more.